All right, hello, and welcome back to another jam-packed episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and joining me today, once again, I think this is the trilogy episode. Yet again, we've got Clif Harski of the PPSC and the FKT Kettlebell certification. I will let him describe these things in greater detail later because he's very soon, actually, not that much later. So, for those of you who are on the edge of your seats, fear not, you're not going to have to be there for too much longer. We're going to talk a little bit about a subject that is near and dear to both of our hearts, which is variety and complexity in training and what those things mean and the kind of benefits that they can have for you, as well as not just being strong, but also being able, being capable, being athletic, all sorts of other good things, and how they fit into your strength training. Because let's be honest, most of us we get into this because we want to be strong and we want to feel good, and then eventually you get a little bit further in your journey and you realize that there are a lot of other cool things that you can add in that not only don't take you away from your goals, but help you to get there even more quickly. And speaking of which, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the best ways that I know of to get a lot stronger is to simply move the way that your body's made to move. And this is something that, again, Cliff and I are going to be talking about at length. And my 9 minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge is something that I always recommend that people start with, whether they're a beginner, intermediate, or even advanced, because it's based around reteaching your body to move the way that it was made to move with some basic but foundational gait pattern movements. And in fact, I just got this testimonial recently that I wanted to just share that I thought was pretty cool. A gentleman wrote that after implementing the 9 minute challenge during a particularly busy season where I barely set foot in a gym, I was repeatedly asked by friends and family what I was doing differently to look leaner and stronger than they had ever seen me. All I knew was that I felt like I'd unlocked a cheat code in my mid 30s. Thanks again. And the gentleman's name was Luke. And I didn't get his last name. I didn't get permission to use his last name, so we're only going to refer to him as Luke. But suffice it to say, it really can be just that simple to get back on track or to add, let's say, a NOS boost to your engine, as it were, even if you're currently on a program. So 9minutechallenge.com, you can get your own free copy. It's the number 9minutechallenge.com. I'll put a link in the description or the show notes, depending on where you were consuming this episode, and you can check it out for yourself. Now, without further ado, Cliff, welcome back.
Hello. So nice to be back.
It is good to have you back. You're piping in from what is it, St. Louis?
St. Louis, Missouri. Last time I was in San Diego, California.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah, you were. I haven't been to either place in a long time. I was in. When was the last time I was in San Diego? I think I was there in like 2012, maybe. It's like one of the few
Mm.
places that I really love in California.
It's definitely nice. I'll be there this weekend actually,
Nice.
and I do miss it, especially when it's gross summers here in St. Louis and also gross winters.
Yeah, how about that? It's everything kind of sucks in St. Louis.
Yeah,
It's
we got like
never
a couple
sunny
of
in St.
weeks.
Louis.
Yeah, a couple weeks in the fall that are pretty nice, but that's about it.
You know, if you think the weather there is crazy, you should check out the weather in Israel, where I live. Like, well, you've read the 10 plagues, there's like
Yeah.
blood, frogs, lice, And this summer, we also had ballistic missiles from Iran. It was
Those are way more inconvenient than flies.
mighty inconvenient. Maybe I'll do an episode on this at some point for people who are interested in what that was like, living through a war. This is actually like the third war that I've lived through, but this was a quite a bit more serious one. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was like between 2 and 4 times a day for like 12 straight days. It was like had to race down to a bomb shelter in my apartment building, um, and yeah, it was like actually the first day there was not to start off on a dour note. I feel like that's how every podcast should start, dour note, and then it's only uphill from there.
It's just happier times.
Exactly. No, but there was
Well,
a
I mean, look,
yeah,
you're still here. That's pretty happy.
exactly. I feel like I lucked out. But yeah, there was a building in my I guess in the neighborhood very close to mine that got like took a direct hit like on the first night, completely annihilated the building. Nobody was hurt, remarkably. Like everybody was in their bomb shelter, and so everybody was fine. But yeah, it was loud. I mean, I could hear it from we could feel it in our bomb shelter from like it was like a 15-minute walk away from where I lived.
Jeez
And it was,
Louise.
yeah, it was mighty intense. But not as intense as the conversation we're about to have because it is going to ruffle some feathers, maybe rustle some jimmies, as people used to say on the internet back.
Buckle up.
Buckle, yeah, exactly. I have a theory that anytime someone says buckle up, whatever you're about to hear is total nonsense. So I don't even notice this, but like on Twitter in particular, it's like buckle up because here's a thread full of BS, and it's like that's exactly what it is. It's just a bunch of like random whatever. So we say this very much tongue firmly in cheek when we say buckle up here.
Indeed.
Yes, but no, I one of the things that I wanted to start off by talking about was I saw some pretty impressive videos that you've put out recently. Not without criticism. There's always somebody out there who's just excited to criticize somebody doing something mildly different from them. The first one I'm going to talk about is you did a double snatch with a pair of 44 kilo kettlebells or 97-pound kettlebells, two of them, and you did like
Yeah.
five in a row.
I won't give myself that much credit. I did two.
Oh, you
And
did
they
two,
were
okay.
not, it was a half snatch. I didn't dive bomb from the top. That felt,
Well, that's if you snatch it overhead, it's a snatch, in my opinion.
yeah. Because I have done multiple reps in a row with double 40s. I just don't have access in St. Louis to double 44s.
Yeah,
And I saw them there. I said, when in Rome or in
yeah,
Austin at the Onnit gym, as it
yeah.
were, um, with a long-term goal of double snatching the beast.
Oh yeah,
And the big thing there is I don't think I'm going to be able to do that unless I have double gold competition belts
mm,
because just the volume of the cast iron bells above a 32, it just starts to be so uniquely challenging with the
yeah,
shape and where it sits that I like swinging from that double bell position. You're basically in a sumo splits position.
you
It's
probably have
it's
to do
hard to
outside
be
the knees, wouldn't you think? Like at a certain point.
at a certain point, but then you're just potentially clipping the knee. So you're kind of screwed from a
Yeah,
sheer mass perspective. And it's like look, it's one of the reasons training with kettlebell is so uniquely challenging.
yeah,
And in that, yes, you're pushing up, but the thing is also ripping you sideways.
yeah,
So how do you overcome that? Or how do you measure what muscle's doing that? I don't know. It's everywhere.
yeah. Well, I think you deserve some credit with for this, especially because I think one of the biggest pieces of criticism that I see that you get is you're like, oh, you're just dancing with the kettlebells. You have a very unique approach. I obviously see the value in it, and having gone through your workshop too, I've experienced the value of it. I think what people don't realize with the kettlebell, or at least the keyboard warriors, is that the stronger you get at more angles, the stronger you get. Period.
Yeah.
And being able to do the same thing in more different ways is also going to have a much bigger impact on, let's say, the standard variation of any given movement than only being able to do that standard version. You just max out your adaptive capacity if you're only doing one particular variation. And it's like, I think if you were to like visualize it, it's like you're just widening the base of your abilities so that it's so much easier to stack up more intensity or more, weight, as it were. Uh, and in particular, walk us through a little bit like what your method is for kettlebell training in general and why and apart from just the reason we've talked about here with the variety, why you find that this added variety and complexity, meaning just more steps, let's say, to accomplishing a particular thing, has such a great impact on what we really want, which is to get stronger.
So my standard approach is something we call the BA method. So BA, first step is be able. That's your fundamentals. Stronger base of support, less rotation, less directionality. It's just this is where most people strength train because it is where you're strongest from a absolute standpoint. So the absolute load that you can handle is greatest here because you're combining leverage, joint stacking, and muscle length to give you the most amount of loading potential.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that means in a lot of instances, like a deadlift, you're spreading the load over more total muscles so that you can pick up more total load. But if we looked at a conventional deadlift compared to a single leg RDL, and I said, which one is giving you a greater overload on the hamstring of your right leg that you're doing the single leg on? It's pretty obvious it's single leg RDL, but it's less total absolute load on the bar. And so when I'm able to change positions, even less than like just doing variety, I think it allows you to specifically stress tissues more specifically and differently than just aiming for heavier all the time.
Hmm.
And what this allows us to do, shore up weak links or train in positions that oftentimes seem to have injury risk, ouchie boo-boo risk for people. And specific to the kettlebell, what it allows us to do is kind of build on what we were just saying about the awkward shape of the bell. It allows you to get more specific overload because you're limited by the shape and size of the bell or how many bells you have. Because if we're being honest about kettlebell training, the reason a lot of people really enjoy it is you can have three of them at your house and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
The caveat being, you know, you can't just keep swinging more, and you can't magically make your kettlebell heavier for your bilateral lifts. And it's like, all right, we'll go to these other positions. Now you're training these muscles in different lengths, in different angles. If it's a different angle or length, that's a different overload. That's just more shit you can do
Hmm.
from widening the base, like you said nicely. And where that comes back to your big lifts is, let's say you don't do it perfectly one rep and you're slightly to the side. Cool. You have a bigger movement vocabulary in which to fix your errant snatch attempt.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the main the main why for me going from be able, that's the only one I've said so far, to be athletic, which is less stable base of support, more directional challenges, and then finally be adaptable, which is like changing points of contact, changing bases of support, because only in the gym is it where we have really steady contact points that we can then be strong out of. Every other element of physicality involves moving points of contact and quickly establishing your leverage through whatever those points of contact are and showcasing strength against external force or propelling yourself through space. And so if we're never training that, there's a pretty good chance you're never going to be good at it and you might end up with a 3 foot broad jump.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of people come to mind who have a mere 3 foot broad jump, despite the time they spend in the gym. And,
Mhm.
one, I always think I always grew up as like a big Indiana Jones fan. And so there are all sorts of scenes that come to mind that I come back to. And there, when it comes to like the gym type strength, like you just discussed, where it's like you've got a lot more control, you've got like all the variables are under control, but that goes out the window with athletic movements or any movements done in the real world where you simply have to be adaptable, like you pointed out, or you have to have uh, the ability to try to accomplish a task, even in like a not perfectly aligned, you know, position. Like let's say picking up a couch to move it, or moving a new piece of furniture into your house or whatever. And Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right? One of the best movies ever. Right at the very end, there's the Indiana Jones, spoiler alert. You've had since 1989 to watch this movie, folks. So if you haven't, I don't really feel bad for spoiling this part. But Indiana Jones drinks from the Holy Grail and he achieves immortality. But the knight who's guarding it says, but the Grail cannot pass beyond the Great Seal, like in the entrance of the building, and that is the boundary and the price of immortality. Meaning you can be immortal as long as you stay here and you never leave. And that's a way a lot of people treat their strength training is they can be as strong as humanly possible as long as they're within the four walls of their gym. And the minute they try to do like a 3 foot broad jump, or the minute they try to roughhouse with their kids, or move a piece of furniture, or basically do some sort of movement in the real world, which is the whole purpose of exercise, to get you better at surviving and thriving in the real world. they fall very, very short because they've limited their own individual development to stuff that they can do in the gym and not the kind of stuff that prepares them to do anything outside the gym. And that's why I like your approach. I think it's not overly focused on increasing the gym lifts alone, regardless of where you train, whether it is actually in a gym or in your basement, but being able to apply that to anything you want. You talked about dunking earlier. You're talking about like dunking a basketball. And you
Yeah.
had a very good example of this. Some people like minimalism, so maybe they'll like this story, but tell us a little bit about like a perfect real world example of this with kettlebell training for improving your jump.
So I've got a big meniscal tear in my left knee. Last MRI in 2022 showed an 11 millimeter meniscus tear on the medial side, and the recommendation was to cut it out. However, I don't ever want to cut out a meniscus until it's flapped or catching or I can't straighten my leg because once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
And the medicine is not there yet to replace that meniscus. That means increased risk of arthritis and pain and all this other stuff. And I've been managing it for 10 years.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things like, let me give it 6 to 8 weeks and see if
Mhm.
it gets back to where it feels good. So I aggravated it on September 4th. And from September 4th, the annoying part is I filmed our entire kettlebell cert the 3 days after that. And so I could not bend my knee past 90. Fortunately, I had my team with me to demo a lot of the stuff. And so I coached it, they demoed. But for a good 2 weeks, I really could not bend my knee past 90. So that meant no squats, no lunges. I've only, for 4.5 weeks, done kettlebell snatches as pretty much my routine. Now, I do step up snatches, I do double snatches, I do half snatches, I snatch for long sets, I snatch heavy and short sets, but the range of motion and the effort in those snatches doesn't matter. It feels fine. And so I've only snatched. I've done some high pulls because I was snatching 150, 132, 124 and heavy bells for reps, and I'm just bruised
Oh
here.
yeah.
Not because of the technique, but because that's a lot of weight
Yeah.
on a bone. And those giant bells, because I know most people just haven't ever done anything overhead with them, it sits in a different spot than normal
Yeah.
where you have no cushion. And so I would do high pulls for repetitions just to alleviate that. I've done some cleans and some jerks, but very minimal. I'm just like, let's just get really good at snatching.
Mhm.
And yesterday, I was at the gym. I said, let my knees feeling pretty damn good. I'm still not going to change what I'm doing because I have to travel and present for the next couple weekends. So I can't risk irritating it and not be able to move. Let's see how my dunking is 5 weeks after my last dunk attempt, where I was able, for the first time in years, to stand, jump, and dunk with no approach. And I felt better jumping yesterday than I had even 5 weeks ago. And I've been like peaking up to that. So it was pretty cool just to see the direct um, results of only snatching very aggressively for
Mhm.
4.5 weeks. And it almost, like to your point, right? It almost flies in the face of, hey, do more stuff because look, I just did one thing and I'm doing well. But it's such a specific thing
Mhm.
for that relates directly to jumping that it makes total sense. And a thought I have, we may have said this in our last one, minimalism can work for a period of time.
For a minimal amount of time.
And I think that that's where people get confused is that they
Mhm.
make a change. They go from something like this giant overtraining smorgasbord of mess.
Mhm.
They go to a minimal program and they experience really good results. And then they go, "Oh, that's what it was. It was this program. Let me do
Mhm.
that forever." And after however long, 3 months, 6 months, they realize, "Oh shit, that actually ain't the thing."
Yeah.
And the reality is like the best training you can do is whatever you're not doing right now because you'll realize the most gains because it's novelty. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's the best long term though.
No, exactly. And that's the big thing is that what I always try to get my followers to understand is that every program has a shelf life, including mine. Like just by necessity, like you might say that there are methodologies that don't really have a shelf life because depending on, let's say, how varied they allow your training to be, you can always rotate in some sort of a novel stimulus that's going to allow you to continue to get stronger. But even at, pardon me, even at that, you know, you've got there's only so much strength training that you can do, let's say with low reps, until you need to bump up to like moderate reps and maybe focus a little bit more on muscle building, or high reps and really focus on getting your connective tissues better adapted, or training at odd angles, or again doing something athletic, like if your feet are always glued to the ground when you train, you never jump, you never sprint, you never do anything like this. You as in this, like, you can't do all these things at the same time, but you can certainly rotate them in. And I remember a an interview that Ido Portal did with Brian Rose on the London Real podcast, like many moons ago, and it was they called it the moving conversation, which was basically just them walking in a park in London and like talking and filming it. But they came up with a cool sounding name for it. But one of the things that Ido said was that, if I want to move, if I'm standing here and I want to move toward this tree, I have to move away from this one here. So
Right.
it's like if you're going to move towards something, you have to accept that you're going to move away from something else. The only caveat that I would say to that analogy is that, when your body gets good enough at something, the distance between those two things necessarily shrinks after a while. So it's not like your tree in one position and the tree in the other is forever going to be at that distance. The eventually your body gets good enough at traversing those distances or getting back to where you once were, you now have a shorter path to get there. So you have to accept that yes, you have to move away from it, but the bonus to that is that you can very often come back to it more quickly when you want. But you do have to rotate things in. You can train minimalistically for a while. There are plenty of perfectly valuable reasons for it. But I think as a principle, as a strategy or as a tactic, it's very good. As a principle, I think it's very limiting.
Yeah. Well, and I always love the opportunity to say this. Maintenance is easy. That's my uh, thing. That's the tree analogy you just did.
Yeah,
I love like that's a cool analogy. But yeah, moving back to that original tree, that's easy. You built
yeah,
it. You can maintain strength particularly easy. It's like I don't care about top end strength at this point.
yeah,
I'm 43. It's not that that's old, but like, what is it going to do for me? I'm a big believer in what is the point? Where is the point of diminishing returns on your big lift?
yeah,
Because if you keep chasing 1% better per year, 5%, whatever the number is, it has to come at the expense. You're moving away from other trees.
yeah,
And at the top end, it's that much more work and recovery needs. It's more costly to everything. So you're actually getting further and further away from all the other trees at the just to chase that one single tree. And for me, it's not what's the word that I'm trying to say here? Like, I don't want to give up those benefits in order to chase the one single thing. And
yeah,
so my favorite is a lot of power training and a lot of hypertrophy training. And both of those things will keep my strength at, I don't know, 80, 85%
yeah.
good enough.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think, and it's not even just physical things that you have to consider. Like now, this is beyond what most people are going to be interested in doing. But like, I remember um, hearing a story about, maybe I'm butchering this, but it was one of my colleagues was saying that maybe he was watching like a documentary or it was somebody that he knew, but it had to do with this power lifter who, I don't know who it was, but he was evidently, pretty well accomplished, but he missed a ton of different things in his children's lives because like, oh, Monday that's bench day, so I can't go to my kid's baseball game. I got a bench. Now, on the one hand, that was his job. It was like probably not his only one because nobody really gets paid strictly to powerlift, especially not in the 90s or the 80s. That was
Right.
like, you were losing money by going to these meets. But that he wanted to chase that 1%, just get better at that one specific thing. But in addition to, having to give up on various different, benefits of the social life or whatever, even his own kids' lives, he wasn't as present as he could have been because he was sacrificing, meaningful experiences with them and, going to their various different extracurricular events so that he could bench press. It's like, was it really worth it? Maybe for him it was, but that's a very extreme example, and a lot of people
Yeah.
apply that mindset to their own training. Like I can only I gotta get this swing and get up to this certain, level. Nothing wrong with swings and get ups or a combination of the two of them. But those are not the only key or even the only way to move forward in your strength training, not even in just in your kettlebell training. You've got a lot of different options. Um, and I think it's easy to lose sight of that because people think that the standard is the only way forward. And it's more than anything. I think it's the ideal way to, as we talked about with the gym, it's like the ideal way to control as many variables as you can so that you can test something. But not every day needs to be test preparation for your training. The
Right.
test comes up now and again just to see what all the other stuff has gotten you.
Yeah, it just comes down to a different mentality of what it is you want to accomplish with training. So a lot of times the minimalist camp, right, historically in the kettlebell world, that's both sport and hardstyle. It's the general recommendations is we want to do the fewest number of things that have the most transference so
Mm-hmm.
that you spend the least amount of time training. Where whereas I'm like, all right, no, I want to do as much as possible.
Yeah.
I literally want to do as much as possible. It's almost the polar opposite because yes, transference happens and getting the big lifts that have the most transference, the most other things, that's the base. That's my be able. That's 60% at least of everybody's program. But there's a reason Verkhoshansky talks about dynamic correspondence and there's a set principles because at a certain point, the what the hell effect, which is just transference, rebranded in a really clever way, is it stops working.
Mm-hmm.
Like it getting stronger at your back squat doesn't make you sprint faster past a certain point. It
Yeah.
doesn't make you jump higher past a certain point. Quarter squats do a better job. But not if you're weak as shit to start.
Yeah.
Just get a base level up, and then there's point of diminishing returns. And you have to do more stuff.
Definitely. Well, the other thing too is that I think the often unspoken uh, the often unspoken rule with that approach of like we want to get as good as possible at the things that have the best transference as possible implies that you're doing something else. So that's why I think what is beneficial with the minimalism. We'll use like Simple and Sinister as an example. It's a great program. I've done it in the past. I really enjoyed it. But like I did it for like a season, then I tested to see how far I'd gotten, and then I just moved on to something different. Um, and I've done the same with a variety of other programs, but you know, a lot of the things that a lot of the like if you have very little time to train, but you're very ambitious regardless, minimalistic program can be useful for the period for which you have very little time to train. If you are, an athlete or you're a special operator and you have PT to do, you got your pull-ups and push-ups and you've got your rucking and running, and you also need to add another base of strength and power that is going to work around your injuries and that's going to not going to have a negative impact on the other stuff that you're doing. Minimalism makes a lot more sense when your only real physical activity, your only real scheduled physical activity is training, your exercise. Then it makes more sense to focus on more things. Maybe not right from the outset, but at least eventually working toward the point where you're training these different movements, you're training these different abilities, so that you're not like fossilizing your movement into just a very narrow set of skills that where the transference is gone. It's like you get to that point where they don't carry over into anything else anymore.
Yeah, your general training has actually comically turned you into a specialist.
Yeah,
You're a specialist at these
a
handful of
generalism. Yeah.
things. Yeah, it's a wild situation to have personal trainers. I see I'm in a unique position in that I've taught at this point, I'm approaching 500 workshops and certs that I've had exercise professionals. So at well over 20 average, that's more than 10,000 fitness professionals that I've coached for 2 days to learn new physical things.
Mhm.
There's not many people on earth that have coached more people, more exercise professionals in person than I have. And so I've got a unique vantage point of watching these people try to learn new skills.
Hmm.
After seeing it 10,000 times, you start to notice things like those who have specialized move like shit in other ways than what they have done. They've trained themselves away from being able to do more stuff. Um, so that's interesting. What you said, athleticism and made that like really intelligent connection. People that are already doing activities, tactical uh, athletes, if you want to call them that, but like operators, and then also actual athletes that play sports, yeah, do minimal stuff, right? Because when you're building specific qualities to help with your sport, that's all you have to do. You get
Hmm.
your variety, you get your angles, you are training for a cause. But when you're just a normal human like myself, like a washed up has been, that just wants to maintain some semblance of athleticism, I have to create athletic opportunities in the gym to develop those things because I'm not playing basketball, I'm not playing volleyball, I'm not playing tennis. I don't get to do these things because of adult scheduling, injury risk. I can't get hurt on the basketball court. It's not worth it. I can't go teach if I do that. And so instead, if I decide to do a lateral swing, I challenge the lateral portion of my body more than a regular swing. And that's it. Like that's as all I'm really thinking of is how do I create athletic expression opportunities in the gym? People do this all the time with plyos. This is hot in the industry this year, right? Everybody's doing plyos again, and we're coming up with new definitions of plyos. After a decade of being condescending dickheads about it's not a true plyo unless it's minus, zero point 0.1 milliseconds of ground contact with
Yeah.
this amount of force. Now we got like yielding plyos, low plyos, deep tier plyos, lateral plyo. I'm like, this is good. I love seeing it
Yeah.
because we need that type of elasticity and whatnot with clients. But same thing is true for lateral movement. I actually talk at the NSCA Southern California Conference this Saturday on how to implement athletic challenges with your general population. And I'm taking them through a kettlebell and landmine series of exercises that are specifically challenging angled challenges. So it's not just enhanced gravity with a bilateral stance.
Hmm.
So they have to experience lateralization and rotation and also power, but directional power because, just get outside of this.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that the more I think about it, um, I think if if you want to train for the rest of your life, the ideal thing to do is to try to retain as many of the youthful qualities that we tend to lose as you possibly can as you start to get older. And like I think, for instance, I'm going through a kick right now where I'm doing just tons and tons of lunges. I'll tell you all about it later, but I've found that it's been very useful. We talk again about choose one thing, you have to walk away from something different, but sometimes you also gain other stuff that you wouldn't have otherwise. Like I took my pistol squats from, I would say, respectable, but nothing crazy, like 15 reps per leg to like 25 per leg without doing any pistols, just because I'm doing like deep body weight lunges and doing absurd volume of them. But I've already
Mhm.
decided that when I'm done, if I can, I'd like to get back into sprinting because I really like hill sprints. I was on a kick earlier. It was just I had this weird thing with my left hip. It didn't work out. It wasn't like pain or anything, but it was like my inner thigh would lock up because I just had some muscle imbalances, and it was like my sign that I needed to work those out before I tried it again. But the point is that I would rather be able to get older and continue to be able to sprint and jump and like explode at a moment's notice. Like whether it's to get out of the way of an oncoming vehicle because there's some you know Gen Z broccoli head texting or filming a TikTok while barreling 40 miles an hour down the road, and as opposed to being like, I'm gonna try to deadlift this car as it as it flies toward me. Um,
Yeah.
I think those retaining youthful qualities that, like you were describing, ability to move laterally, you can do that with strength training, and you're getting a little bit of both. So it's like you can do a lot of lunges and you can improve your pistols. You can do lateral deadlifts, lateral swings. You can improve your lateral movement, and you do it with less risk to your connective tissues. And so it's like there are ways that you can start to work people toward those things, giving them what they want as well as what they need. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can take what you've already got and you can make it more effective. You just have to, you can't ask, you don't need to ask for permission. This is the big thing. I think a lot of people are looking to ask for permission to do these weird variations.
100% because they get made fun of if they
Yeah.
do. If you do anything outside the accepted, like this is the normal, then you're like, oh, you doofus, loser, functional boner. Um, and it's comical. That's been an enjoyable thing for me in like little weird pockets of kettlebells. People are like, of course you do that with a small weight. And then I'll do it with the beast and be like, what now? You can't do the regular with this weight.
Yeah.
I'm dancing with this weight because I practice doing it and still do it over here. And I see that with the people that adopt it is like, a lot of people talk about you don't do complexity because you have an inverse relationship between complexity and intensity.
Hmm.
If it's very complex, you can't load it aggressively, therefore it's a waste of time. And I'm like, yeah, in the beginning, but when someone's new to deadlifting, they don't load it at 400 pounds or 500 pounds. You
Yeah.
have to build your weight. It's the same as every other form of training. You get better at it and you get more coordinated as well.
Yeah.
And that's a big piece of for me of why to do it is motor skill acquisition is in itself a trainable quality.
Hmm.
Whereas, like if you don't get better at more by doing less
Yeah.
in the long term. You have to do more to learn how to do more. And then you have more letters to write better words of movement words.
Exactly. No, I think that's a very good way to look at it as like vocabulary, I'm a big fan of learning foreign languages and to really break it down. A lot of people, I think, specifically native English speakers, because there's not really much of a need to learn foreign languages if you're a native English speaker. So I think a lot of them kind of fall back on what they would do in like a high school Spanish class. It's like a lot of grammar drills and stuff, which are useful, but ultimately you need to have a decent enough vocabulary, and a lot of times the grammar sort of fills itself in, and you kind of work it out, even if you can't articulate why you're supposed to say a certain thing in a certain way. Eventually, it just begins to sound right, but you need enough vocabulary in order to be able to attempt to make these conversations to let the grammar sort of seep in. And I think it's very similar with training in general. If you're limiting yourself to just the same phrases over and over again, let's say, swing, military press, pull up, all great movements, all very useful. But if you're not adding any variety to them, you're not adding any extra movements or anything else that will assist these movements, ultimately you're going to be very limited in how much, again, with language learning, it would be like socialization that you can do. And with strength training, it's like what kind of movement that your body's capable of that you're never going to be able to even approach because your body just hasn't been trained to do it. It's not incapable of doing it, but whether or not you end up being capable depends on the input that you give it, so that your body can then give you the ability to take those ideas you have in your head and translate them to something that you can do on the soccer field or while roughhousing with your kids or while out hiking with the family and things like that.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking of as you're saying this, right? Because bringing it to a kettlebell lens specific, you will have a lot of kettlebell folks when they see the stuff that we do, which is just lateralization
Mhm.
and moving footwork and doing things out of different stances. It's really not that crazy. Like you saw in the cert, when I break it down, it's like, oh, that's actually not very complicated, like at all.
Yeah.
Shit. It looks fancy,
Yeah.
but in broken down terms, it's actually just like move your foot over here and do the same thing. Um, and don't be scared of rotating when your body's in position to accommodate for it.
Exactly.
But but you have the knee-jerk reaction, which is that's different, therefore it must be bad because the gospel hasn't blessed this with okayness yet.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people will say is that's too complex. Forgetting how they get irritated themselves. The kettlebellers get irritated themselves when a power lifter or bodybuilder says, don't do that because it's too scary and complex. You're going to get hurt swinging that bell around.
Yeah.
Or because it's off to the side, you can't load it as much. It's too complex. And
Yeah.
then and the kettlebeller goes, well, that's why it's farm strong and we wrestle bulls. And we sound like idiots. But then the power lifter, right? Like the bodybuilder looks at a power lifter and says, oh, no, too scary, too complex, things could go wrong. Well, a bodybuilder that's even using dumbbells, that's more complex than a machine. So this is like an endless thing where complexity is relative and
Yeah.
it's all your perspective. And I just want people to feel like they're more competent and confident in how many things they can do. And so just adding things that they can do over time. That's the other piece is like, how many years have you been training? You talked about seasonality.
Yeah.
Like when we do this, it's the biggest challenge in any course that I teach when we do a bunch of variety. People, so they're like, what do I do with this? I'm like
Pick
sprinkle
one.
in one new thing every
Yeah.
block. You don't have to do all of it at once. It's seasons. You do 4 week blocks, you do 6 week blocks, you do 12 week blocks, whatever. Like focus on a new thing per workout. That's it. Stack those wins, move the trees closer together over time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's understandable why people would find it overwhelming. And similarly, like, how do I do this all together? There's
Yeah.
like you said, it's like one at a time. You get good enough at it, and it's going to cut down in the amount of time it's going to learn the next thing. It's going to take to learn the next thing, and then the thing after that, and then you can go back to the first thing, and you still got it. You don't need to re-practice it. You haven't gotten rusty. And I think the main key for people to keep in mind is that there's there if you consider like what we now look at as like what it takes to get strong. All right, the bench press. We'll just use the power lifts as an example. The bench press. Well, nobody really did the bench press until like the 50s, and they did it primarily, as I understand, as like a means of trying to improve, as like an assistance exercise for the military press. Back squats. There weren't even people have done squats for ages, but they were usually high rep squats, or if they were adding weights, they were doing them on the toes. Or they're doing them again for like front squat style or what have you. There wasn't really such a thing as a squat rack until the last couple of decades where you could reliably load them up. Even in, like you see some of the guys doing powerlifting in the 70s and they're like, it's like cobbled together wood. It just looks like it's going to collapse. So a lot of these things
Yep.
that have made these movements possible, similarly, deadlifts with plate loaded barbells, deadlifts weren't really that common amongst old time strongmen. But then, that the old time strongman type of training created men like the Saxon brothers and like Arthur Saxon, who could put 300 pounds over his head on one arm and according to unofficial records, even 385 on one arm. Uh, like, like it was his job, and in this case it was, but it wasn't. He didn't get
Right.
there from bench, squat, and deadlift. He didn't get there from he got there from using a method that by and large people don't use anymore. But nevertheless, he got extremely strong doing it. So there's not really if we there were only one way to get strong, we would know. There are certain principles you need to get strong, certain principles you need to get athletic, but those may be carved in stone, but the strategies, those are written on paper and they can be erased and changed depending on what your goals are. And the tactics are like written on a chalkboard. Like you just very
Yeah.
easily get rid of them and change them as needed. So a lot of people get overly focused on thinking that they need to carve in stone certain tactics and certain strategies, and they deny themselves the ability to do a whole wide array of very cool exercises and the stuff that's going to develop in the way that they want, because like we talked about, people are looking for permission, or as marketing master Dan Kennedy would say, everybody's walking around with their umbilical cord looking for somewhere to plug it in. They want
That's
that
pretty funny.
connection, and they want someone to tell them what to do and what to think and whatever. And Cliff and I are here to tell you to think different.
Indeed. Indeed. Do more.
Do
Just
more.
like not experiment because this is experiment, yes, but I don't mean tinker. An experiment is try something for like a quarter,
Yeah.
like a long enough time to actually do it. Now, once you've been doing things consistently for 2 decades or more at this point, then you may not need a full 3 months to give it a good college try. You could try it for one 4 week block, which is probably what most people run is like a 4 week block of stuff, and then they switch it up a little bit, or at least part of it. Um, but when you do that, it just yeah, I really like now I'm going to be stuck on this whole tree idea for the day, where you're just moving the trees closer and closer together, and you're pinging between them pretty darn easily.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I should have been a philosopher, but somehow that just skipped me. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, you could probably weave in a forest for the trees, like tie in at some point.
You know
Yeah.
what? I did have a good line for you that I thought would be good for you to use. You can probably use AI to come up with the song. You've heard that Billy Idol song, Dancing with Myself.
Yep.
You got to have Dancing with My Bells, and it's just you doing
Son
a
of a bitch.
compilation of. You get to use it. This is it. I'm officially granting it to you. It's on recording, so it's
I'm writing it down.
good. Dancing with My Bells,
Idle,
and
dancing. That's going to be fantastic.
by the way, I'm going to add one other thing before you continue. The video has to start with like a compilation of like trash talking comments, like you're just dancing around, blah blah blah, and then it's you like dancing with like the 48 and like snatching it with ease, and of course you let people know that's 48 kilo bell, and you're doing like the snatch dance revolution or whatever you called it.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. The snatch revolution, the cha-cha slide.
yep,
Those are the two silliest. What snatch revolution is not a great idea of the 48. However, the cha-cha slide is.
absolutely.
Um, so the dancing thing, going back to it, because I do think it's comical, and this plays into the minimalist approach as well, right? A minimalist oftentimes coincides with this like overly manly tough guy demonstration. And I get that a lot from it looks like you're dancing with the bells. And I'm like, cool. That means I'm doing this like with finesse
Yeah,
and smoothness
yeah,
at a heavy weight. And there's this over machismo situation that happens a lot within fitness. It's pretty prevalent in kettlebells, and you can understand why. Like in kettlebell sport, it's all about enduring pain.
yeah.
So don't be soft, which to be fair, like, yeah, have you ever tried any like real long cycle?
I've not. I have
Bro,
no desire.
I'll play with the idea and then I'll do like a set light and I'm like, God damn, this is miserable.
Yeah, it's
And then I give up because I am soft. And then but the opposite side, hard style, like it was a shtick of being this don't be girly man like thing. It's a bit of a shtick.
yeah.
And the unfortunate reality is like people take it serious. It's interesting question to me is like I think it's fair to say the RKC, man, is on its last legs at this point because the public facing head of RKC was Pavel
Yeah.
and Duquesne's marketing. And they split in 2012. And at this point, like there's not as many RKCs going on, and you just do not necessarily know the name as much,
Hmm.
right? I think it's a fair analogy. And like obviously they at some point Dan John came over, which definitely helped them quite a bit because of the name
Totally.
recognition and authority. But Dan's getting up there in age, right? Like he's not gonna be able to be the head for I don't know how much longer. Like he's very youthful and he's it really improved his own physicality within the last year here.
Yeah, it just keeps getting better and better. But the other thing is traveling too. I mean, like I have friends. I'm already at an. I don't feel like I'm old, but I'm already at an age where I'm like, I don't want to travel that much. Like I like every once in a while for sure. Like I can't imagine you like always traveling. Here, there, everywhere. I'm sure it's still at a point where it's enjoyable, but you also get to the point where you're like, "Eh, I like to just chill for a little while. And like,
It's exhausting, especially with the little kids at home.
yeah,
Hard on my wife, hard on me, hard on the boys. Like definitely don't want to do it as much. But where I was going with the
yeah,
RKC and SFG thing is, right, like, so that shtick from Pavel was always tempered with a self-awareness comedic value. There's
100%.
like a wink behind
Oh
it.
yeah,
But where it falls apart and where, truth be told, like there's a bad reputation on a lot of the RKC SFG Americans that are team leaders is they just come across like assholes, condescending dickheads when they talk about everything because they don't deliver it in the same tongue-in-cheek shtick
Yeah.
behavior. And unfortunately, that doesn't really like strike a chord with everybody. And so my question is, when Pavel exits, because he's also going to be exiting at some point, I don't know when it is, but he's even less of a figurehead now than he was 5 years ago, 10
Mhm.
years ago, certainly, is what does that company look like? How do they adapt? They've been doing a good job of adapting, right?
Yeah.
Like they incorporate kickstand swings now. When I tried to do that at the event I went through pre-split, I was like, shame. They did the shame bell like Game of Thrones, like
Yeah.
shame. You can't be powerful in that stance. Um, it's an interesting time in the kettlebell community to see like who's going to be next, like who's going to be the education, who's their figurehead.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
I
a
don't know what
good
the answer
feeling.
is.
I thought about this recently, and I do think that Strong First will do okay because Pavel, he's genuinely a very humble guy. Like
Mhm.
he doesn't view him. I read an interview with him. I would never have said this because I don't think I'm egotistical, but I do think I have more of an ego than Pavel does maybe. But somebody asked him, what do you want your legacy to be? And he said, it's vain to think in those terms, to think that you're important enough to be like Benjamin Franklin or George Washington, where you're going to leave a legacy. So I'm not planning on leaving a legacy. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he was being sincere. Like from his perspective, he doesn't want he never wanted it to be all about him. I know for a while it was, for instance, when he was with RKC, it was RKC by Pavel. My understanding, and again, this is third hand knowledge, was that um, he wanted he just wanted it to be RKC, so it stood on its own. But then there was like there was a few senior level instructors who went off to go do their own thing, and they wanted RKC to be seen as like this is the origin point. And so it
Mhm.
was like Pavel is the reason why the RKC matters. But when Strong first started, he wanted to, again, he wanted to get back to the basics where it's like the principles stand on their own, and he comes in periodically, and but that his master instructors are the ones who kind of get elevated to the next level, so that people will want to seek them out. So that way, it doesn't all just fall to him, so it doesn't become like this cult of personality. And I think that's smart because I think of like um, one of my favorite books. I don't know if you've ever read it, Psycho Cybernetics.
Mhm.
It sounds nuts. It sounds like you're like, oh, this is like I don't
Terminator.
like the title. What's that?
I think Terminator.
Oh, I was gonna say no. I mean, it makes sense. The
Yeah.
cybernetics. I always thought it sounded kind of like Scientology. It has nothing to do with Scientology. It's just it has this kind of like scientific sounding name, but it was written. I'll just give you the very brief overview. It was written by a guy who was one of the first plastic surgeons in the U.S. who realized that a lot of the people who came to him for plastic surgery just needed a better self-image, and so he started working on like how do I help people improve their self-image? What does it mean to improve your self-image? And so he wrote this book in like 1959 or something like that. And in the US, it was huge in like the 60s, all the way up until about, I think he died in 75. And then it kind of like petered out because he was like the face of it. And so it's still around. The company is now owned by Matt Fury, I mean, it's in very good hands with Matt because he's like, uses it, he's an expert with it. But nevertheless, I think if you have an idea that you want to last beyond you, it's got to transcend just you. So if people see you as being the epicenter of it, you run the risk of like what happened with psychocybernetics, which is still very well known in like business circles and some athletic circles, but not so much by like the general populace. And you and I are in this to try to help the majority of the people out there who actually need our help.
Right.
There are athletes who can use the things that we teach, but they're such a small percentage, and they have coaches and they have, access to the best facilities and stuff like that. The real way that we move the needle to help people is by making something that is accessible to the people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I talk in our BA thing. be accessible is
Yeah.
one of the tenets that we have. But where I was going with the strong first, as far as like, I just don't, I'm like genuinely curious because the name brand at this point is so entrenched,
Yeah.
right? Like it is the fact that they were able to take RKC, flip it into strong first, and strong first replaces that as the name brand. Very impressive. It's a very
Yeah.
straightforward, easy to remember name as well. So
Yeah.
good branding. But I'm curious to see where it goes. I don't think it'll ever go anywhere. Like it'll just exist, but I
Mhm.
don't know who will be the figurehead or the main driver
Yeah.
of information going forward. Um, and this is like a 5 year, 10 year thing, but like you and I probably plan on still working in fitness in 5 and 10 years.
Of course.
So it's always interesting to me.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I remember, oh gosh, this was, I think before the split, there was a certain then former master instructor who said, I don't think it's going to exist. Meaning, he was talking about RKC because this was before Strong First. He said, I don't think it's going to last more than maybe 3 to 5 more years. And he was like partially right because like, there was the split. Um, but it's very difficult to predict these things because it's also like who would have predicted that an unwieldy cannonball with a handle would end up being something that, especially something that is like as low tech as it gets in a society that's obsessed with technology, would
Yeah.
end up becoming something that you would see in Hollywood movies and that big stars would use and that the military would want to use and all this other stuff. Um, that sort of thing is very difficult to predict. So I am curious too, and I often wonder, but I guess I'm not. I'm in my own world, I suppose, and that I mostly view like my system and my approach and how I use it to help other people, and I'm not like a part of the leadership at Strong First or privy to a lot of the goings on in there. So yeah, I don't know. My hope, of course, is that like it continues to go very well. And like the very diplomatic answer to is I want everybody to win. So I also,
Right.
of course, want to see everybody do well because ultimately we're trying to see other people improve their fitness and their health and what have you. But yeah, I don't know. Is it you pose a very good question.
It's interesting. Look, I encourage at our events, when anyone asks, like I encourage them to go take every cert they can because I think it just increases the total knowledge base of the tool. And
Yeah.
if you happen to be very, you know, keen on the tool, because I think that I'm honest about it, I think you're honest about it. It's like the tool itself, part of the allure is the skill acquisition
Yeah.
of being better with the tool.
Yeah.
And I know that's why some people get into kettlebell sport. I took a kettlebell sport cert in January. Um, and
Who'd you
I
take it from?
really, Denis Vasilev
Ah, Dennis
online.
Vasily.
That guy is a
He's in California,
machine.
right?
He is, yeah.
Yeah.
He'll be
I
at Belfast in Nashville in November.
Oh, he's gonna annihilate everybody. He's gonna be like, yeah, all you do is just snatch 100 times in your right arm and then do it again on your left. What's the big deal?
Man, when I see these guys do that shit, I'm just like I think we were talking IG about, hey, at a certain point, right? Like, is a set of snatches simply about your grip endurance? Because your lower body, your lungs isn't the thing tapping out. And I know the other part is fixation overhead for some people, but there was a surprising number of kettlebell sport people that said it was the fixation versus the grip. And I was like, what are you guys doing for your grip that is so like you just have iron claws?
Yeah.
Because mine peters out really, really quickly, unfortunately.
That's
But
one of the things. Actually, Pablo mentioned this in Easy Strength, the book that he did with Dan John. He said one of the reasons he got rid of the one hand switch for the original snatch test was because it was really like um, the grip was the limiting factor. It wasn't the lungs, it wasn't the legs, it wasn't the heart. It was just the grip. And so you don't need to not switch your hands. In most cases, I mean, if we want to think about like real world, you could switch, you got two hands. You can like switch your grip and very often in a lot of things. Um, but yeah, that is a good question. I know a couple of kettlebell sport guys and I mean, it's just brutal. Dave Whitley has said before that he thinks kettlebell sport could have only originated from Russia, from in particularly Soviet Russia, because it's just so painful that like the joy of it is being able to put the kettlebell down at the end. So like life doesn't seem as awful. He said he had a much funnier way of putting it, but it was like basically that it only could have originated there because it's just life was so hard that you're like, let me make it momentarily way harder so that I appreciate like the base level of difficulty doesn't feel as bad anymore.
The I look, we've beaten the don't just do the basics to death, but the other one that I like to tease kettlebell people, whether it be sport or hard style, is this. And you brought it up with, hey, bench press since the 50s.
Yeah.
So what's comical is when people now are like, you're not supposed to use it that way. You're not allowed to use it that way. It's
Yeah.
meant for this. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure these things were scale weights at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
Or so you guys aren't using it what it was meant for either. We
Exactly.
can reinvent what it's meant for and how you use it all the time.
Yeah, I that is one thing. I try not to get involved in like, arguments online, but I do get a kick out of like the sport guys being like, "You're using the kettlebell wrong." It's like, well, kettlebell sport effectively originate as it is now. Its origins like 1948. So you're gonna
Right.
tell me for hundreds of years people were using kettlebells wrong until Stalin came around and decided to, codify it in more or less its current form. It just doesn't make any sense.
No.
But c'est la vie, that's just how people are. We like to be tribal,
Yeah, 100%. Since you came to the course, I'm going to build on your single leg statement you said earlier,
Yeah,
because obviously my bias is single leg stuff, partly because I think it's just better than the other,
yeah,
but also because I've got my own pre-existing injuries that absolutely must color what I like to do.
yeah, yeah,
I I don't think when you came through, it was December 23 that you came through in
yeah.
Nashville. I don't believe we did Bulgarian cleans in that course.
I don't think we did. No.
So it was the summer of 23 when I first did a kettlebell Bulgarian clean. And I did it like randomly through that year. And then April of 24, I went all in and was like, this is actually feeling really goddamn good. And it's a vertical path of the bell. So it's a
Mhm.
hang clean, like a hang barbell clean, but on one leg. And because you're in the split stance, it stays close to you, so you don't have to dodge your knee.
Yeah.
And the one version I would do if I was anybody is a hang, catch underneath, stand. Hang reflex, drop underneath, stand.
Hmm.
Anyway, I trained, this was my principal lower body drill on Tuesdays from April until October. And I've ended up getting a triple where I had an anchor bell outside the working leg of 124. And inside, I was cleaning the 106. So a grand total, 230 for a triple in a Bulgarian on a hang clean.
Wow.
Not bad. More interesting to me, maybe 10 days later, because I was not training it, strength training it. I was doing the power version. And maybe every 3 weeks, I would do like, all right, now rep out the weights I was using for one set of an AMRAP.
Sure.
Well, I tested my um, trap open trap bar Bulgarian max and hit 335 for a double,
Wow.
which I've never done before. And I'm older now than when I was younger, training for a max effort, which my max back then was a double for 315. So I was like, this is pretty cool to go with power training of the Bulgarian clean and take my 1RM and my 2RM and 3RM higher than I've ever had before. Neat.
Yeah.
Maybe useful.
Yeah. That's the other thing is if you can do that with less weight, why go heavier? I mean, that's actually a quote from Enter the Kettlebell. If you can train for this is Louis Simmons said this, one of the greatest powerlifting coaches of all time. He said, if you can train for a 700-pound bench with a 53-pound kettlebell, that's great. Why go heavier?
Right? Yeah, makes
It's,
sense to me.
yeah, I think that you nailed it. It's like if you can train power or let's say higher reps or just do something avant-garde that is less likely to get you injured and still get you where you want to go. Let's say in this case, like a heavier Bulgarian, why go heavier? Why not just do that?
Yeah. Big time. Well, and part of that, right? So I look at it going back to athleticism. What are the muscles that make you jump higher, cut faster, sprint longer? What muscles in your body?
Lower body. Just
Cool.
anything in the lower body.
Is it the traps? Is it the lower back? Probably not. And
Right.
this is my smart ass way of going. When we just focus on going heavier,
Yeah.
what muscles tend to be the limiting factor for people going heavier? Grip, that's why people strap up.
Sure.
And then if you haven't lifted heavy in a long time and you come out of it, where are you sore? Traps, lower back.
Like,
What does
yeah.
that tell you? Those were the limiting factors. So like I could go trap bar deadlift right now. I might blow my inguinal hernia out of my crotch. So I probably won't.
Yeah.
But like if I did, I can absolutely tell you that the only thing I'll feel the next day, my traps and my lower back, because it's not accustomed to lifting that heavy weight.
Yeah.
But if my legs can handle it, and the goal was that my legs are the driver of jumping and doing stuff, then win. This is anyway, it was a little off topic, but
No, it's
kind of
I think
interesting.
it's makes perfect sense. Yeah, I had not thought about that. Grip is the obvious, weak link for a lot of people, but true, yeah, low back and the traps are often two of the things where if you're trying to go heavy with a deadlift, for instance, it's going to stop you short. And
Yep.
if you don't want to constantly spend all your time trying to bring those up just so you can go heavier, and you can go heavier by doing something different, why not do the lighter thing, the different thing, especially if you're less likely to get injured along the way.
Or feel less stiff
Yeah.
because facts are like getting stiffer is better at lifting those heavier weights.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you actually get stiff doing it.
Yeah.
It's part of the adaptation that's normal and should be expected. So I call those the construction man muscles. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, if you want to be like a construction man that picks up heavy stuff and then puts it right back down, great. But if you want to like move through space, probably move through space.
Yeah. Seems like it's a lot more useful for most people most of the time.
I would say so. And that's, I think, why we end up where we end up as over 35 and over 40-year olds. So many people end up going, hey, stop doing it. We all become, I say this jokingly, and it's not a mockery. We all become Boyle at a certain point
Yeah.
where we're like, yeah, we just don't do the barbell bilateral lifts anymore.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, like unless you end up spending a decent chunk, unless you're an outlier, or you spend a decent chunk of time working on your mobility and recovery from these positions, they just end up leaving a lot of people feeling stiffer and achier and uncomfortable. And it's like, yeah, maybe just Bulgarian split squat instead. Because,
Simple as
oh, it
that.
makes, yeah, you're like your knees feel better and your hip flexor feels better and you're stronger and your back doesn't hurt. These are all wins.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and I think again, people, if they could do anything, they would rather turn the clock backward than forward. People naturally assume moving stiffer and not having as much mobility with being older. So it doesn't have to be either or. You can get stronger and you can remain athletic and mobile. And the way to do it is by not asking permission and asking, what if? Ask
Yeah.
yourself, what if I did this for a little while as opposed to just only ever doing this? And then just see what
What's the worst
happens.
that's going to happen?
There's always an answer to that, but very often it's a better answer than you would think. So,
Yeah.
well, this has been, as always, a very stimulating conversation. Where can people follow you to get more information about the PPSC and FKT, the functional kettlebell training modalities? Now's your time. Pitch. Let us know where people can follow you and stalk you all over the place.
It's Instagram at Clifton Harski, Instagram at Functional Kettlebell Training, Instagram at Pain Free Training, and online website is at www.painfreetraining.com. So PPSC, Pain Free Training, is the umbrella company that Functional Kettlebell Training sits underneath.
Hmm.
And it's we've got a few different courses that all play nicely together on training methods, systems, concepts. Like we're really agnostic on tool. Obviously, the kettlebell's less agnostic because it's about how to use it. But my goal is that people walk away kind of thinking about exercise optionality differently from the course, and the kettlebell is just a tool. Like we actually have a great landmine course online that follows the same type of protocol. where it's like
Nice.
do the basics, make it a little more complex, and get squirrely and weird with it at the end if you want to or not.
I love it. Folks, follow Cliff. He's a very wise man, and he can do some pretty cool stuff with the kettlebells, which I know you are going to be intrigued at a minimum to see, but seeing maybe believing, but doing is understanding. So hopefully he will inspire you to want to do some things a little bit different in your training and get a whole lot more in your gaining. So, Cliff, once again, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, sir.
And as always, folks, have fun and happy training.